great nation would present. He possessed much learning, and his training as a member of Pharaoh's household had doubtless given him dignity, confidence, and poise, and had accentuated his ability to organize and command. But the lowly occupation of shepherding in Midian provided the training needed to develop fine qualities that would be even more important for the task ahead of him. Similarly, David underwent rigorous training, even after being anointed by Samuel, and Jesus Christ was tried, tested, and proved to be perfected as king and high priest forever. Yet Christ learned obedience from the things he suffered. And after he has been made perfect, he became responsible for everlasting salvation to all those obeying him. Heb 5. 8, 9. His appointment as deliverer. Toward the end of his 40-year sojourn in Midian, Moses was shepherding Jethro's flock near Mount Horeb when he was amazed to see a thorn bush flaming with fire but not consumed. As he approached to inspect this great phenomenon, Jehovah's angel spoke out of the flame, revealing that it was now time for God to deliver Israel out of bondage and commissioning Moses to go in his memorial named Jehovah. Acts 3. 1-15. Thus God appointed Moses as his prophet and representative, and Moses could now correctly be called an anointed one, or Messiah, or the Christ, as at Hebrews 11. 26. Jehovah, through the angel, provided credentials that Moses could present to the older men of Israel. These were in the form of 3 miracles as signs. Here, for the first time in the scriptures, we read of a human empowered to perform miracles. Acts 4. 1-9. Moses not disqualified because of diffidence. But Moses showed diffidence, arguing that he was unable to speak fluently. Here was a changed Moses, quite different from the one who had, of his own accord, offered himself as Israel's deliverer 40 years earlier. He continued to remonstrate with Jehovah, finally asking Jehovah to excuse him from the task. Although this aroused God's anger, he did not reject Moses, but provided Moses' brother Aaron as a mouthpiece. Thus, as Moses was representative for God, so Moses became as God to Aaron, who spoke representatively for him. In the ensuing meeting with the older men of Israel and the encounters with Pharaoh, it appears that God gave Moses the instructions and commands, and Moses, in turn, relayed them to Aaron. O textoi acute miritra longo. Moses 436. Surface of the ground. New 12. 3. As a meek person, he recognized that he was a mere human, with imperfections and weaknesses. He did not push himself forward as Israel's invincible leader. He expressed, not fear of Pharaoh, but an acute awareness of his own limitations. Before Pharaoh of Egypt, Moses and Aaron were now key figures in a battle of the gods. In the persons of the magic-practicing priests, the chiefs of whom were apparently named Jan and Jambus 2-3. 8. Pharaoh summoned the power of all the gods of Egypt against the power of Jehovah. The first miracle that Aaron performed before Pharaoh at Moses' direction proved Jehovah's supremacy over the gods of Egypt, even though Pharaoh became more obstinate. Acts 7. 8-13. Later, when the third plague occurred, even the priests were forced to admit, it is the finger of God. And they were so severely stricken by the plague of boils that they were altogether unable even to appear before Pharaoh to oppose Moses during that plague. Acts 8. 16-19. 9. 10-12. Plagues do softening and hardening work. Moses and Aaron became the announcers of each of the 10 plagues. The plagues came as announced, proving Moses' commission as Jehovah's representative. Jehovah's name was declared and much talked about in Egypt, accomplishing both a softening and a hardening toward that name. Softening the Israelites and some of the Egyptians. Hardening Pharaoh and his advisors and supporters. Acts 9. 16. 11. 10. 12. 29-39. Instead of believing that they had offended their gods, the Egyptians knew that it was Jehovah who was judging their gods. By the time 9 plagues had been executed, Moses too had become very great in the land of Egypt, in the eyes of Pharaoh's servants and in the eyes of the people. Acts 11. 3. There was a marked change in the men of Israel also. They had at first accepted Moses' credentials, but after experiencing harder working conditions at the order of Pharaoh, they complained against him to the point that Moses in discouragement appealed to Jehovah. Acts 4. 29-31. 5. 19-23 The Most High at that time strengthened him by revealing that he was now going to fulfill that for which Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had looked, namely, the full revealing of the meaning of his name Jehovah and delivering Israel and establishing it as a great nation in the land of promise. Acts 6. 1-8 Even then the men of Israel did not listen to Moses. But now, after the 9th plague, they were solidly behind him, cooperating so that, after the 10th plague, he could organize them and lead them out in an orderly way, in battle formation. Acts 13. 18. Courage and faith required to face Pharaoh. It was only in the strength of Jehovah and due to the operation of his Spirit upon them that Moses and Aaron proved equal to the task set before them. Picture the court of Pharaoh, the king of the undisputed world power of that time. Here was unparalleled splendor, the haughty Pharaoh, supposed to be a god himself, surrounded by his advisors, military commanders, guards, and slaves. Moreover, there were the religious leaders, the magic-practicing priests, chief among Moses' opposers. These men were, aside from Pharaoh himself, the most powerful men in the realm. All this impressive array was aligned to back up Pharaoh in support of the gods of Egypt. And Moses and Aaron came before Pharaoh, not once, but many times, Pharaoh's heart getting harder each time, because he was determined to keep his valuable Hebrew slaves under his domination. In fact, after announcing the 8th plague, Moses and Aaron were driven out from before Pharaoh, and after the 9th plague they were ordered not to try to see Pharaoh's face again on pain of death. Acts 10. 11-28. With these things in mind, it becomes most understandable that Moses repeatedly appealed to Jehovah for assurance and strength. But it must be noted that he never failed to carry out to the letter what Jehovah textoi acute miritra longo. Moses 437 centuries later the Apostle Paul said, of Israel's subsequent crossing of the Red Sea. Our forefathers were all under the cloud and all passed through the sea and all got baptized into Moses by means of the cloud and of the sea. 1 Co 10. 1, 2 Jehovah did the baptizing. To be delivered from their murderous pursuers, the Jewish forefathers had to unite themselves with Moses as head and follow his leadership as he led them through the sea. The entire congregation of Israel was thus, in effect, immersed into the liberator and leader Moses, mediator of the law covenant. In the 3rd month after the exodus from Egypt, Jehovah demonstrated before all Israel the greatness of the authority and responsibility that he placed upon his servant Moses as well as the intimacy of Moses' position with God. Before all Israel, gathered at the foot of Mount Horeb, Jehovah called Moses into the mountain and, by means of an angel, spoke with him. On one occasion Moses was privileged to have what was probably the most awe-inspiring experience of any man prior to the coming of Jesus Christ. High in the mountain, alone, Jehovah gave him a vision of his glory, putting his palm over Moses as a screen, allowing Moses to see his back, evidently the afterglow of this divine manifestation of glory. Then he spoke to Moses personally, as it were. Acts 19. 1-3. 33. 18-23. 34. 4-6. Jehovah told Moses, "You are not able to see my face, because no man may see me and yet live." Acts 33. 20 centuries later, the Apostle John wrote, "No man has seen God at any time." Job 1. 18 The Christian martyr Stephen told the Jews, "This Moses is he that came to be among the congregation in the wilderness with the angel that spoke to him on Mount Sinai." Acts 7. 38 So Jehovah was represented on the mountain by an angel. Nevertheless, such was the glory of Jehovah as manifested by Jehovah's angelic representative that the skin of Moses' face emitted rays so that the sons of Israel could not bear to look at him. Acts 34. 29-35. 2 Co 3. 7:13. God constituted Moses mediator of the law covenant with Israel, an intimate position such as no man has ever held before God except Jesus Christ, the mediator of the new covenant. With the blood of animal sacrifices Moses sprinkled the book of the covenant, representing Jehovah as one party, and the people note out the representative older men as the other party. He read the book of the covenant to the people, who replied, "All that Jehovah has spoken we are willing to do and be obedient." Acts 24. 3-8. Job 9. 19. In his office of mediator, Moses was privileged to oversee the building of the tabernacle and the making of its utensils, the pattern of which God gave to him, and to install the priesthood in office, anointing the tabernacle and Aaron the high priest with the oil of special composition. Then he took oversight of the first official services of the newly consecrated priesthood. Acts chaps 25-29. The chaps 8, 9. A fitting mediator. Moses went up Mount Horeb several times, remaining on 2 occasions for periods of 40 days and nights. Acts 24. 18. 34. 28. After the first of these occasions he returned with 2 stone tablets written on by God's finger, containing the 10 words or 10 commandments, the basic laws of the law covenant. Acts 31. 18. 4. 13. On this first occasion Moses showed himself to be fittingly qualified as mediator between Jehovah and Israel and leader of this great nation of perhaps 3 million or more. When Moses was in the mountain, Jehovah informed him that the people had turned to idolatry, and Jehovah said, "Now let me be, that my anger may blaze against them and I may exterminate them, and let me make you into a great nation." Moses' immediate reply revealed that the sanctification of Jehovah's name was the thing of primary importance to him. That he was completely unselfish and did not desire fame for himself. He asked nothing for himself but, rather, O textoi acute miritra longo. Moses 438. Many were the times that Moses represented Jehovah's side of the covenant, commanding true, clean worship and executing judgment on disobedient ones. More than once he also stood between the nation, or individuals thereof, and their destruction at Jehovah's hand. New 12. 14. 11-21. 16. 20-22, 43-50. 21. 7. 9. 18-20. Unselfishness, humility, meekness. Moses' chief interests were in Jehovah's name and his people. Consequently he was not one to seek glory or position. When Jehovah's Spirit came upon certain men in the camp and they began to act as prophets, Moses' assistant Joshua wanted to restrain them, evidently because he felt that they were detracting from Moses' glory and authority. But Moses replied, "Are you feeling jealous for me? No, I wish that all of Jehovah's people were prophets, because Jehovah would put his Spirit upon them." New 11. 24-29. Although he was Jehovah's appointed leader of the great nation of Israel, Moses was willing to accept counsel from others, particularly when it would be of value to the nation. Shortly after the Israelites left Egypt, Jethro visited Moses, bringing with him his wife and sons. Jethro observed how hard Moses was working, wearing himself out handling the problems of everyone who came to him. He wisely suggested an orderly arrangement wherein Moses would delegate degrees of responsibility to others, to lighten his load. Moses listened to Jethro's advice, accepted it, and organized the people into thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens, with a chief over each group as a judge. Only the difficult cases were then brought to Moses. It is noteworthy also that Moses, explaining to Jethro what he was doing, said, "In the event that a people have a case arise, it must come to me and I must judge between the one party and the other, and I must make known the decisions of the true God and his laws." In this, Moses indicated that he recognized his duty to judge, not according to his own ideas, but according to Jehovah's decisions, and that, moreover, he had the responsibility to help the people to know and recognize God's laws. Acts 18. 5-7, 13-27. Moses repeatedly pointed to Jehovah, and not himself, as the real leader. When the people began to complain about food, Moses told them, "Your murmurings are not against us Moses and Aaron, but against Jehovah." Acts 16. 3, 6-8. Possibly because Miriam felt her prominence might be eclipsed by the presence of Moses' wife, she and Aaron jealously and disrespectfully began to speak against Moses and his authority. The record shows that their speech was all the more contemptible, because it is at this point that it says, "The man Moses was by far the meekest of all the men who were upon the surface of the ground." Moses apparently was hesitant to assert himself, meekly enduring the abuse. But Jehovah was incensed at this challenge, which was actually an affront to Jehovah himself. He took up the issue and severely chastised Miriam. Moses' love for his sister moved him to intercede for her, crying out, "O God, please. Heal her, please." New 12. 1-15. Obedience, waiting upon Jehovah. Moses waited upon Jehovah. Though he is called Israel's lawgiver, he recognized that the laws did not originate with him. He was not arbitrary, deciding matters on his own knowledge. In legal cases in which there was no precedent or where he could not discern exactly how to apply the law, he presented the matter to Jehovah to establish a judicial decision. 24. 10-16, 23. New 15. 32-36. 27. 1-11 He was careful to carry out instructions. In the intricate work of constructing the tabernacle and making its utensils and the priest's garments, Moses exercised close oversight. The record reads, "And Moses proceeded to do according to all that Jehovah had commanded him. He did just so." Acts 40. 16. Compare New 17. 11. Repeatedly we find other statements that things were done just as Jehovah had commanded. O textoi acute miritra longo. Moses 439 directed attention to themselves, Moses saying, "Hear, now, you rebels. Is it from this crag that we shall bring out water for you?" With that, Moses struck the rock and Jehovah caused water to flow forth, sufficient for the multitude and their flocks. But God was displeased with the conduct of Moses and Aaron. They had failed of their primary responsibility, namely, to magnify Jehovah's name. They acted undutifully toward Jehovah, and Moses had spoken rashly with his lips. Later Jehovah decreed, "Because you did not show faith in me to sanctify me before the eyes of the sons of Israel, therefore you will not bring this congregation into the land that I shall certainly give them." New 20. 1-13. 32. 50-52. PS 106. 32, 33. A writer. Moses was the writer of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, namely, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. His writership has been acknowledged by the Jews throughout their history, this section of the Bible being known by them as the Torah, or law. Jesus and the Christian writers frequently speak of Moses as giving the law. He is generally credited with writing the book of Job, also Psalm 90 and, possibly, 91. Mount 8. 4. Lu 16. 29. 24. 27. Row 10. 5. 1 Co 9. 9. 2 Co 3. 15. Heb 10. 28. His death and burial. Moses' brother Aaron died at the age of 123 years, while Israel was encamped at Mount Hor, on the frontier of Edom, in the 5th month of the 40th year of their journey. Moses took Aaron into the mountain, stripped off Aaron's priestly garments, and clothed Aaron's oldest living son and successor, Eleazar, with them. New 20. 22-29. 33. 37-39 About 6 months later, Israel arrived at the plains of Moab. Here Moses, in a series of discourses, explained the law to the assembled nation, enlarging upon it with adjustments that would be necessary when Israel changed from nomadic camp life to a settled one in their own land. In the 12th month of the 40th year in the spring of 1473 BCE he announced to the people that, according to Jehovah's appointment, Joshua would succeed him as leader. Joshua was then commissioned and exhorted to be courageous. 31. 1-3, 23 Finally, after reciting a song and blessing the people, Moses went up into Mount Nebo according to Jehovah's command, first to view the promised land from this mountain vantage point, then to die. 32. 48-51. 34. 1-6. Moses was 120 years of age at the time of his death. Testifying to his natural strength, the Bible comments, "His eye had not grown dim, and his vital strength had not fled." He was buried by Jehovah in a location ever since discovered. 34. 5-7 Likely, this was to prevent the Israelites from being ensnared into false worship by making a shrine of his grave. Evidently the devil desired to use Moses' body for some such purpose, for Jude, the Christian disciple and half-brother of Jesus Christ, writes, when Michael the archangel had a difference with the devil and was disputing about Moses' body, he did not dare to bring the judgment against him in abusive terms, but said, "May Jehovah rebuke you." Jude 9. Before crossing over into Canaan under the leadership of Joshua, Israel observed a 30-day mourning period for Moses. The 34. 8. A prophet Jehovah knew face to face. When Miriam and Aaron challenged Moses' authority, Jehovah told them, "If there came to be a prophet of yours for Jehovah, it would be in a vision I would make myself known to him. In a dream I would speak to him. Not so my servant Moses. He is being entrusted with all my house. Mouth to mouth I speak to him, thus showing him, and not by riddles. And the appearance of Jehovah is what he beholds. Why, then, did you not fear to speak against my servant, against Moses?" New 12. 6-8. The conclusion of the book of Deuteronomy describes Moses' privileged standing with Jehovah. But there has never yet risen up a prophet in Israel like Moses, whom Jehovah knew face to face, as respecto textui acute miritra longo. Moses 440 had beheld God with his own eyes, instead of merely having a mental vision or a dream in which he heard God speak, which was the usual way in which God communicated with his prophets. Jehovah's dealings with Moses were so real that Moses reacted as if he had seen the one who is invisible. Heb 11. 27. Evidently the impression made on Moses was similar to the effect of the Transfiguration vision on Peter centuries later. The vision was so real to Peter that he began to participate in it, speaking but not realizing what he was saying. Luke 9. 28-36. And the Apostle Paul likewise experienced a vision that was so real that he later said of himself, "Whether in the body I do not know, or out of the body I do not know. God knows." 2 Co 12. 1-4. No doubt Joshua's extraordinary success in establishing Israel in the Promised Land came, to an extent, by reason of the fine qualities inculcated in him by Moses' training and example. Joshua was Moses' minister from his young manhood on. New 11. 28. Evidently he was army commander under Moses. X 17. 9, 10 and was close to Moses as his attendant in many experiences. X 24. 13. 33. 11. 3. 21. Prefigured Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ made clear that Moses had written about him, for on one occasion he told his opponents, "If you believe Moses you would believe me, for that one wrote about me." Job 5. 46. Commencing at Moses and all the prophets, when in the company of his disciples, Jesus interpreted to them things pertaining to himself in all the scriptures. Luke 24. 27, 44. See also Job 1. 45. Among the things Moses wrote concerning Christ Jesus are Jehovah's words. "A prophet I shall raise up for them from the midst of their brothers, like you. And I shall indeed put my words in his mouth, and he will certainly speak to them all that I shall command him." 18. 19. The Apostle Peter in quoting this prophecy left no doubt that it referred to Jesus Christ. Act 3. 19-23. In many ways there was pictorial correspondency between these two great prophets, Moses and Jesus Christ. In infancy both escaped the wholesale slaughter ordered by the respective rulers of their time. X 1. 22. 2. 1-10. Mount 2. 13-18. Moses was called out of Egypt with